So that's really interesting to see. And there's no right or wrong answer here, and it's not to kind of judge yourself, but just to kind of reflect on your connection to this topic, really. So I'll stop sharing that now. And so without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first speaker for this evening, which is the lovely Karen Creavin, who's a good friend of ours and does amazing work at the Active Wellbeing Society, where she's the CEO. So the Active Wellbeing Society is a co-op and community benefit society based in Birmingham, but working all over the country. And Karen is really wild and willful. So she's an anti-poverty advocate and a year-round world swimmer in her local rivers and lakes. So really excited to hear from Karen on this topic this evening. And I'll hand over to you now, Karen.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. It's lovely to be here as ever. It's a real pleasure, and it's a great opportunity for us to talk a little bit about the work that we do. And I just want to admit that I feel slightly a fraud this evening, because this is a conversation about nature, and I'm sure there's plenty of people sitting there thinking, what does Birmingham know about nature? Most people's perception of Birmingham is that we're that car park called the M6 as you drive past us. But actually, Birmingham is one of the greenest cities in the country. We've got a lot of parks and open spaces. But also really importantly, I think we've got really high levels of deprivation. There are 408,000 people who live in the city of 1.1 million people. 408,000 of them live in the top 10% most deprived households in the country, which means that we're living with a lot of inequality. And so for us, and for me, getting the opportunity to talk to you about both nature and also its role in sort of connection and inequality is really key. So I'm going to share my screen with you. I'm going to share with you some of the work that we've been doing in the city along with colleagues. This is very much a collaborative piece of work that we do. We are a community benefit society and a cooperative. We were once the Wellbeing Service for Birmingham City Council, and we came out of the council about 3 years ago. We've got great relationships still with the local authority, and they're part of the funding for some of the work that we do. This particular programme that I want to talk to you about and how we've made connection with nature is actually funded by Sport England, and it's a test and learn pilot. It's a piece of innovation. It's part funded by the National Lottery as well, and we've been very lucky to be able to do this work. It's all about connecting urban communities with nature as a way to build resilience, create active citizenships and get people more physically active. And for us, it's thrown up some really interesting and exciting issues around nature. I'm not going to dwell too much on this, and I won't read it all out. I'm more than happy for these slides to go out if people want them emailing, and obviously you'll see these, you can play them back. But there's some key evidence here around the benefits of physical activity outside. There's some key evidence around the benefits of just being outside, actually. But there are also some important lessons and information around the barriers, particularly that children in the most deprived areas of Britain are 9 times less likely to have green or suitable areas to play in. And I noticed as people were joining and introducing themselves, there's quite a few people here who work in outdoor play. I think for us in Birmingham, we're really clear that actually the city was designed most recently with cars in mind and with transport networks and with jobs in mind. It's not a city that handles very well meeting human need around a need for connection with nature. Despite that, I was out this morning picking wild garlic along the River Ray, less than 5 minutes from where I live, which is actually in itself less than 3 miles from the centre of the city. I think it's really important to understand the complexity of nature in an urban setting, and also some of the issues that mean that people are less likely to connect to it and more likely to be afraid of it. We've seen a massive impact on people's behaviour, obviously during COVID. With the kind of communities that we have in Birmingham around deprivation and ethnicity, we've got communities, and Nasreem will talk more about that when she speaks, but we've got communities who have really felt the impact of COVID in a really detrimental way. There's lots of anxiety around people returning back into the community, into connection with nature and space. And I think for us, it's thrown up a really interesting set of discussions that I can see beginning to be played out nationally about what is the role of cities if we're not moving people in and out of them to facilitate work. And I was reading an article just the other day about Nottingham, who's aspiring to put in a wilderness park right in the city centre, and where there would have once been a shopping mall. So there's some really interesting opportunities for us to turn and face cities, to meet human need around nature, and also urban agriculture, particularly in relation to food poverty in our city. That's a really big issue for us. Our work has very deliberately been called Rewilding the Commons, and it's all about taking back that sort of space in cities that's often gritty urban civic space that can feel quite unloved and quite unintended. So it'll be the big grass verges down the side of a dual carriageway. It'll be the disused drying areas around tower blocks that were built in the 1970s, when hanging your washing out was something that people did. There's a whole raft of places in cities that are often tarmacked or grassed because we don't know what else to do with them. And actually what we've been doing is working with local communities to reimagine their space and to help them to see it as places that they want to be involved in, connecting with the nature in them, whether that's to be physically active with a sensory walk or a run. And some of my colleagues involved in that are on this call tonight. I've seen Taz and others, but it's also around using space to grow. And on this picture, what you can see at the bottom on the right hand corner is a beautiful growing room, a round structure that's been put in right in a city, urban Aston, in a local community who want to do growing and change the way that their community is perceived and that they perceive their community. So a raft of projects working with local citizens. What we've done is we've created new social and active spaces, disused space into community space. We've positively disrupted existing spaces and built connection with nature. Part of it is also about making sure that we change the systems that would define how people should use their cities and connect or not with nature, and build capacity within communities. Some of the key learning points for us, and I think that I would want to bring into this debate really, is that there's no shortage of interest in the city around a different use of space, particularly around connecting people to nature. And there's a really important issue that's coming up, I think, in all the nature debates around the clarity around land ownership, and the idea of using land for profit or using land to meet need. I won't go through the whole slides, but I would just want to say it's not just about space. It's also about capacity building. How do we help communities that have become, over the last 15, 20 years, really disenfranchised from their local nature, that they might often see it as a threat rather than an asset, actually reconnect with it and imagine how they might step in and use it for the things that would make their lives feel better. It's not just about transporting people out of Birmingham into the hills to go walking. You know, we see it all the time. Our schools stick kids on a minibus and take them out to experience nature outside of the city, but actually we've got a plethora of nature in the city that we're not looking after. I'll stop it there, if I might, and I'm going to pause and hand over to Nasreem, if that's all right, Flo.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. I'll just introduce Nasreem first, but thank you so much for sharing. And just to remind people before introducing Nasreem that if you have questions for Karen or Nasreem or any of the speakers this evening, please do write them in the chat box with the question in front of them or a Q. And actually, Karen, there was a very, very brief question that I thought we could just quickly address before we go on to Nasreem, which is just from Maggie. When you say that the Active Wellbeing Society works across the country, do you mean the whole of the UK or just England?
Well, so far just England, actually. Yes, very good point of clarification. They were not averse to travelling further.
Yeah, okay. Great, thanks. But further in-depth questions we'll get to in the questions section after we've heard from Nasreem. So yeah, really exciting to have actually two Birmingham-based speakers this evening, actually, because I think, and a lot of the points that Karen's raised around access to nature are so important and valid, and actually really build on the launch event that we had of this series, which was 2 weeks ago, but we can share the recording to that for anyone who missed it in the follow-up email, which was all around access to nature and well-being for all, and how vital that is to, you know, that nature isn't something that's kind of separated from us, like Karen says, that, you know, put people on minibuses to get to, but it's something that should be embedded in all of our lives, even if we're in bigger cities like Birmingham. So to move on to our next wonderful speaker, Nasreem Akhtar. Nasreem works on championing and pioneering and challenging the opportunities in physical activity and sport for ethnically diverse communities, especially for Asian women. So she really works on getting more diverse communities into the natural world. And Nasreem works on a project called Saheli Hub, which delivers a range of indoor and outdoor programs supporting women to cycle, run, and support their well-being outdoors in Birmingham. And really excited to hear from Nasreem this evening. She's going to be sharing on how her work has been adapted in the current context as well. So over to you, Nasreem.
Thank you very much. Just checking you can see this. Share screen, and here we go. Can you see that? Yeah, get it onto the slideshow.
Yeah, perfect.
Oops, sorry. There you go. Can you see that? Okay, so thank you for inviting me, and I'm really glad I followed on from Karen because actually Karen does some amazing work and they are our main champions. So I really appreciate the fact that I'm following on from Karen. I'm going to do a 21-year history in 10 minutes. So it's going to be really rather quick. So I'm going to rush through, but you can always ask questions afterwards. So why were we set up? Well, I grew up in a family of boys. I love sport, physical activity. And I always thought things would change in my neighbourhood for women and girls as I grew up. I got to the age of 30 and nothing had changed. So I was asked by the local neighbourhood forum if I would get involved in one of their residents groups, and they decided to set up a women only group because men, other women, especially Asian women, weren't getting involved. So what did women want to do? I don't know if it was, we were a generation of TV breakfast watchers and we saw the green goddess every morning, thought we can't take part. We all wanted to do exercise, fitness and sport. So the study, we consulted 260 local women and they wanted a centre run by women for women in the area. I'm going to cut a very quick story short. We started to set up a young girls club in 2002 for girls aged 13 to 18, and we took them rock climbing, skiing, canoeing. From there, we managed to build on that program, and in 2006, we were able to launch the Saheli Adventure Hub, which was a well-being centre in the middle of Walsall Heath, a very urban community, majority Asian. And what was great was the local GPs started to refer their local women in. And then in 2014, unfortunately, we lost our site, but that's when Karen stepped in and the Active Wellbeing Society helped us to relocate into a local park. And so now in 2019, we operate out of 3 wellbeing sites, 2 GP surgeries, and we work with 1,595 women and 80% are BAME, and 90% are from the indices of multiple deprivation, quintiles 1 and 2. So I'm going to quickly rush through some pictures because I want to get my 10 minutes in. So this is what I did with the young girls group, and you can see in the corner there some of the older women. We were tasked to get women running, and this was our first ever run about 10 years ago. We've still carried on running. This was the Great North Run. We were invited to go up there because I suppose in many ways there's not many ethnic minorities representation. And then we started to travel. So if we could do it in Birmingham, we could do it in the Great North Run up Newcastle, then maybe we could go to Ireland and Scotland, and we did. And then we did a lot of cycling, developing opportunities for women to develop and grow, train up our own local coaches. And so you'll see the lady in the yellow who fully hijab, niqabs. She is one of our trained leaders, and we took part in the Velo ride last year. We try and pioneer things out in the open. You can see the screens at the back so nobody can come in. Nobody can see in. And we did a Zumba and a triathlon, we called it. So it was running, cycling, and because there was no pool, we did Zumba at the end. And then COVID hit. So amazing numbers, amazing. What do we really do? It was such a really difficult time. I'm going to leave those stats up there, but we talked to over 300 women, contacted them, befriended through our service, asked them what was the impact of COVID. 48% said they stopped exercising. or did less, and then 32 said they'd stopped. 32% said they stopped exercising altogether. So around about 70% of the women we worked with weren't doing anything at all. But 84% said that physical activity was really important to them, and 59% said that they didn't use Zoom, weren't going to use Zoom. So what could we do? So we decided we would stay in contact with the women through our WhatsApp groups. And so what we do is we send a physical activity video every day, whether it was the physical activity, Zumba, aerobics, etc., or just cooking, or finding a quiet breathing space. So that's what we started to send every day to the women. This was some of the comments that were made, but the comment you really need to look at is right at the bottom where I rang a lady and she said, "You're the first human voice I've heard in over 2 weeks." That's how isolated some of the community that we work with had become. So this was what we would do every day. We'd send a message and we'd ask how people were. Everybody would then come back to us after a video when it was shared. As you can see, this is the African dance video. And then people would say things like, "Oh, I always wanted to learn African dance," so they could do it at home. And the reason this worked was many women didn't want to be exercising with other people. They didn't have the confidence. They didn't have the know-how to use Zoom. So we stuck to sending videos. And I always joke that the most popular video was how to make donuts in the middle of Ramadan. And so the other thing that really happened was in May, the 30th of May to the 5th of June, Cycling UK decided they would do the 7 days of cycling to get people back on their bikes. Asian women that I work with are notorious for not having their picture taken, not wanting to be on the film. So we challenged them to take a picture with their bike every day for 7 days. And it actually grew to the point where a lot of the women started to make films, never mind just pictures. So that was amazing. And a little comment there, I wish I'd learnt cycling with you when I had the chance. I would have had something to do during lockdown. So we decided to, after all that survey, we recognised women wanted to come out. As soon as lockdown eased, we started to set up bubbling activities in the parks where we operated from. So no one would have to go any further than what they were used to. And what we decided was we'd stick to the rule of 6. So we have 5 people, 1 instructor, and then a bubble protector on the side who would ensure social distancing was kept at all times. And as you can see here, we used the bays of the car parks to make sure that the distance was being kept. So that was 3 parks, Handsworth, Calthorpe, and then Ward End Park. So it allowed us to deliver spaces which people could book, sorry about that, and what they could do was stay in the bubble of 6. If there was a COVID kind of outbreak, if anybody said they're feeling unwell, we only had to contact 5 other people and not everyone through our scheme. So it proved really, really successful. And of course, we were hoping to go back to this. And of course, this is just the stats I'm going to go through, you can have a look at. And what we hoped that this would carry on, but unfortunately in January, we were told it wouldn't happen. So we then ended up, as of last month, setting up Zoom. And what we decided to do was do a morning call. That's what used to be the best time for people for the women we work with to attend. So we stuck to the 9:30 morning call. So 9 months later, we actually now have over 20 women turning up at the sessions. Whereas when we first started, there was 2 or 3 women and no more. The quick thing I wanted to say was, in all honesty, going out to the countryside is an absolute luxury for some people. Many of the women we work with never go outside of Birmingham. And when we do things like take them to the Lake District, or we do walks, or take them to Ben Nevis or Snowdonia, one of the key things we get is a lot of fear of safety, a fear of the unknown, a fear of being out of their comfort zone. They don't like the idea of being somewhere where if something happens, they can't phone someone and say, "I am here." Because in a city, they'll know where they are. And out in the open, there's always, it's just like you can go to the park every single day. The one day you hear in the whole year, something has happened in the park, everyone then gets upset and doesn't come to the park. So there's a lot of our community who believe that the outdoors and the great outdoors is not for them. The other thing I would say to you is that for me, over the years, the more we've taken women out, the more actually their appetite for experiencing more grows, and they start to really ask for things they've always wanted. They see people do it on the TV, you know, take a walk up Snowdonia. They see that and they think, well, that's great on the TV, but it's not really for me. And that's the kind of barriers we really have to break. And communication is a 2-way street. If you don't see pictures of BME communities up on a mountain, you're never going to think it's for you. If you're all you're going to see is people who are technically athletic, or somebody white middle class who can, for them it's natural to do that. Our kind of communities think, well, that's not really for us. And I think we've really got to open those kind of communication channels as to what we can or can't do. The other thing I would say actually is that as a community, we've developed people into wanting to have these adventures. That's how we see it. But what I would say to you is, our community, the majority who came over in Birmingham, we're a rural community. They were farmers. They came over here to make their money and go back, and they didn't. But they've come here and they've stayed in an urban jungle, because for them, they don't have the opportunity to be able to be out or afford the kind of property they'd like to in a lovely kind of area. So my father came over. If you saw where he came from and then he came to Birmingham, you'd think, why would he leave paradise? But that paradise didn't give him the opportunities to help bring up his children, get them educated, get a free service when it came to health. So these are the kind of things that our communities came from. But here they accept being in the inner city because they think they have friendships, they have relationships, they have networks, they can always have someone to rely on. But to be out in the country would mean that you would end up having to be on your own. And what would you do? Who would you call? Who would you rely on? So I'm going to leave it there. And hopefully if you want to ask questions, please do.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Nasreem.
Thank you.
That was a really, really inspiring and energizing presentation. I meant to say after Karen presented as well that I know it can feel strange sometimes to present to a screen and not get the reaction, but there is a little reactions button if people want to give a little heart, and I know that or round of applause with your reactions, and I know that people have already shared in the chat box how much they've appreciated what's been shared, and I think that what you've shared there are so many accessible lessons to, in terms of really listening to the communities you're working with and meeting them where they're at, and adapting to the context and the circumstances. So many transferable lessons that are really relevant, hopefully, to everyone joining, and really, really inspiring to hear about. So thanks again. We're inviting people to share your questions for Karen and Nasreem in the chat box with a Q or a question in front. And just to we're going to have one round of question and answers now for Karen and Nasreem, and then we're going to hand over to our further two speakers. Just to let people know that Karen, bless her, will have to drop out after this first round of question and answers because she's had her COVID jab today and she's not feeling her best. So thank you so much again, Karen, for joining us under the circumstances. And just to let the audience know that if you have questions that you're very keen for Karen to answer them, this slot will be the one to ask those in. So I'm hoping that the wonderful team from Now and Eden have been working away in the background to coordinate the questions. So I'll hand over to Tracy from Eden Project Communities to manage the asking those questions.
Thank you. They've done a sterling job. And just to say, if we don't get them all answered, I'm sure we can pester our speakers post-event. So I'll ask for Karen from Sue. Do you advise and support new projects in other cities? So they're really interested in whether you help people.
Sure. I mean, we're doing some work right now actually with Jaywick, which is in Essex, one of the most deprived super output areas in the country, and we're doing some work with the local authority at Essex County Council all about bringing in the free bike scheme that we've been doing into Essex. Yeah, I'm more than happy to do that. We're funded by Sport England and the National Lottery. Part of the work that we're doing is all around test and learn, and they're more than happy for us to disseminate things more widely anyway as part of this. But yes, very happy to work in with other parts of the country and learn as well. It's always a fantastic opportunity for us to find out more about what else is going on and bring that back into the West Midlands in the work that we do there too.
Thank you. And you've already answered, you've been keen on that chat, Karen, and so you answered my 5K question, which I was interested Wendy asked, how do we get the balance, and this could be for Nasreem or Karen, how do we get the balance between growing food and keeping natural habitats safe? So how do we get that balance right? Do you have any suggestions?
Shall I go first, Naz, and you come in after? So we have this all the time, actually. We've got a couple of parts of Birmingham as well, where we've got a couple of nature reserves, and there's a real tension, not just around growing, but around actually letting people into them. There's this real tension about if we have too many people coming in, whether it's for growing or just for enjoying some habitat, aren't we in danger of destroying it? And I think it's a really finely held balance. I don't think there is any one straightforward answer. One of the things I would say that we need to be able to do is to encourage people to connect with nature and understand how to look after it. That sort of empathic stewardship is really important, and to understand that in order for us to have good quality growing spaces, we actually need a greater biodiversity. It really plays to that notion of wild, really, about the importance of keeping some areas just really really wild, really in a state that's as natural as possible. So I'm not copping out, but my view would be that you just have to reconsider the balance the whole time. There are some environments where it's much more straightforward and much more of an obvious decision, and then there are other places where I think we really have to hold in our minds the importance of being able to connect people with a place and with the nature in it, but also the importance of having people-free nature. And I just in a country or an island as densely populated as ours, I actually think that's quite a tension. That said, people are always really shocked at how much of the island isn't as inhabited as they imagine it to be. So that balance between the human need and the need of the world does need to be refined much more. And I'm probably there are probably people even on this call much more with much more expertise than me, but the bit that I would want to bring is the importance of respecting humans in all of that too.
Thank you, Karen.
And I would add that my community grew up growing things at home. So I was taught when I was very young how to grow coriander. I was shown how to grow garlic, all that sort. And we do have lots of gardens, and of course having a lawn is really important to some, but it's about how you balance that out with what you can grow. So I think it's really about giving people the skills, the knowledge, free seeds, every house, to be able to do that. Because I think for us, we've got an allotment where a group of Asian women are growing their own food on an allotment. And it's proven really popular. Now, getting other people engaged who don't see it as important is the harder thing. So even though we've got a group of 10 women who are really committed to this allotment, and sometimes they turn up at events with the carrots, with the coriander, and say, look what we've grown ourselves. But it doesn't mean to say automatically our community want to go back to that, because I suppose sadly, we all want a convenient life, and most people want peas to grow in fridges rather than in their garden. And there's nothing we can do about that when we think about it. But if we try and give people opportunities to take part, that's what I find really helps. If you give people opportunities to take part, that's how it starts to actually get bigger and bigger.
Fabulous, thank you. I'm sure people really appreciated those answers. I don't know what you might advise on this, but Joanna has asked, their council wants to build on a green space around a block of flats and replace it with a mini park and a couple of planters and a caged activity space. How do we persuade them that it's not good for well-being?
Do you want to go first, Naz, this time, or do you want me to?
No, you go.
It's a tricky one, isn't it?
It's a tricky one, and I don't really deal with it very often.
I don't know who the council are, but my starting point is always to be able to demonstrate what the residents want, if possible. I don't think it's as straightforward as that, though, because often people's starting point is, well, what can I have, rather than what do I really want? And you need to be really clear when you're going into asks like that people will tell you things based on who they think you are and what you want to hear, unless you have that relationship of trust, which is why the work that Nasreem does is so important, because they're in the communities, they've got those relationships already. Women are really genuinely able to talk about what they dream around and what they're inspired to do, because they've got those relationships. But my starting point would be, if your gut feeling, if the questioner's gut feeling is that this is really something that the residents don't want, to start there. and to try and work with the council to understand that actually there is opposition from within those residents, if indeed that's the case. But it's a really difficult one. I guess, you know, like for me, the starting point with all of these things is about relationships. If you can get to understand who it is that's making the decision and what's driving them to make that decision, build that relationship, explain why it needs to be different, then that goes some way. You know, lots of local authorities have lots of staff in who are just people trying to do their best job. They think often that they're coming from the right place. I've been one of those officers myself. You know, actually, when you meet a group of committed residents who are telling you they want it to be quite different, that can be music to your ears. So don't assume that they're actually coming at this thinking that that's what they actually want. They may well have been advised equally. But yeah, the starting point for me would be to get underneath what do the local residents want, and is there a coalition around a different solution, and then have conversations with the officers driving the change to see what scope there is to look at what's driving them to make that decision and whether there's any scope for it to be any different. Again, it's the kind of thing that, you know, I'd be happy to talk offline with somebody about.
Well, I think you've popped it in the chat, your email address, but Joanna has said it's Brent Council, and they're not talking to the tenants. So looks like we might
then you need to set up a petition, because you need to be able to walk into a meeting and like say, I've got 700 signatures here or 1,000 signatures here, and then what you're doing is putting weight behind your argument and your idea. So it really is definitely what Karen said about a relationship, because if you walk in with 1,000 signatures in your back pocket, so to speak, they have to listen, because ultimately some of the people making the decisions want to be voted in 4 years' time. So if they don't listen to what the community want, then we all know what we can do. That's just
Thank you. No, it's nice to give people a little bit of oomph and ammunition, I think. There's a question for you now, Nasreem. Someone's just really interested how you're funding, and is there any ways that you're working that you can make the activities you've set up sustainable in the long term?
Yes, so we originally thought we were very sustainable because we had, you know, NHS funding, and then the government changed the NHS funding to the local authority. Luckily, we had someone amazing like Karen in there who saw the reason for what we were doing and why it was really important. So we carried on being funded through that. We have a GP referral scheme, and that's the key thing about getting GPs to sign up to part with some of their cash, because actually we are saving them in the long run heart conditions, diabetes, injections, tablets. So that is the way to go. But I would say to be totally funded and be in a poor community just never happens, because ultimately we can't charge, because we would lose everybody. And equally, even the GPs don't have secured funding these days, never mind the local authority. So it really is about trying to see if you can secure money for more than 3 years. For us is security. So at the moment, we're very secure through the Active Wellbeing Society's Active Communities Programme, the Sport England funded programme. We also are able to then, because we're a charity in our own right, we're able to apply elsewhere, so to the local neighbourhood network scheme and our GP. So it always has to be a combination. I always call it the 30%, 35% almost, which is you always need to have some kind of funding. You also need some commissioned work, and then you also need to generate your income to cover costs. So if you can do the 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, most of the time you do survive. And we've been here 21 years. I don't want to curse us, but we hope to be here for another 21 more. But it really is about building relationship and partnerships. But there is genuinely no such thing as, what's the word, long term. And when I say long term, I mean 10, 15 years of funding that is not from either the local authority or the NHS, etc.
Yeah, I just want to echo that. I don't think any of us can count our sustainability chickens at the moment. I think things are really shifting, and it doesn't have to be a bad thing, but I think all of us need to be able to pivot and be quite fleet of foot at the moment.
Thank you both. I think they're really, really valid points, and I think it's nice to see people talk about sustainability and not self-sustaining, because in working with communities that are incredibly deprived, that's even more difficult, and we've seen a lot of our services go because people are trying to be self-funded. So thank you very, very much for all that, and I will hand back over to Flo.
Yeah, thank you so much for that round of questions. And just to say a huge thanks to Karen, because I know that she's going to drop off a bit early. So thank you so much for being with us this evening, Karen. It's been wonderful to have you. And we'll send around Karen's slides and contact details for that follow-up information as well. So now we're going to move on to our second two speakers of the evening, and then following we'll have a second round of Q&A. So Nasreem will stay on for the second round of Q&A as well, if you've got questions that pop up related to what she shared, and I'll introduce our next speaker. So our next speaker of this evening is Tempest, who has worked with communities and trees for the past 20 years and is currently a manager of a number of projects which bring the two together in really interesting ways. And the projects that he focuses on are really obsessed by the places that people and trees flourish in together, and he's really attempting to regenerate landscapes by inviting people into these places. So yeah, really looking forward to hearing from Al. I'll pass it over to you now.
Great, thank you. Let me just share that. Can everyone see that? We good? Great. Well, yeah, thanks so much for everyone who's put their effort in to coordinate this and everyone who's turned up. Such a great event. My name's Tempest, and I'm down in South Devon, just outside Totnes, Dartington. I am a director of the Woodland Presents Community Interest Company, and we are we're spending our time trying to find out how to help regenerate Britain's trees and woodlands, and how we can bring people in to help us do that and see the landscape start to flourish through doing so. We've been going for about 5 years, and we're quite a sort of multifaceted task force. We do a lot of different things. Just to kind of give you a little overview of why we're doing it, about 50% of our trees and woodlands in the UK are unmanaged, which means they grow dark, grow unproductive, and the biodiversity starts to dwindle. So we're looking to bring more into management, make them more productive. We're kind of like real advocates of increasing biodiversity, regenerating ecosystems, but at the same time, we're human and we need timber and we need wood, so we're kind of realistic about the fact that we need productivity alongside that. The average age of a forester is about 55, 60, and there's a whole woodland culture that we've come away from and growing more to be indoors, technologically focused. I'm assuming that all of you have got some background in getting people outside, so I'm not going to go into that too much. But yeah, so I've been asked to sort of focus our work rather than give a broad perspective on the way in which we're trying to engage people and get people back outside. So we're making it our mission to regenerate land by inviting people to it. And the regeneration of the land aspect is basically, as we see it, we're in a kind of post-conservation era whereby the landscapes we're left with are not enough to sustain human and non-human life. And we see a real synergy between bringing the therapeutic value of bringing people in, the well-being value of bringing them into the outdoors and doing regenerative work. So the main way that we do that is that when we generate any kind of profits from our CIC, we reinvest them in land regeneration activities, and we try and use our group of volunteers and community members to do that work as well. So yeah, I'm just going to go through. I've tried to kind of like make this as useful as I can. So rather than just sort of tell you all the things we're doing, I'm picking out 5 kind of strategies that we're finding are working for us, and I'm hoping that you're going to be able to. That's going to be relevant to you in some way, even if you're in cities. We do a bit of work in cities, but we're mainly a rural enterprise. So there's a kind of no-brainer here in terms of tree planting and the benefits of it, in terms of it being a really good form of outdoor exercise and a really good social activity. it makes you feel good because you're putting something back, and it's so satisfying at the end of the day where you could just see a field and it's just transformed, and you know how many trees you planted and you're proud of that. So year on year, we've been planting around 2,000 trees with our group of volunteers who we call Special Branch. And we kind of got a little bit sort of despondent with that amount because it just seemed like a drop in the ocean. So we were thinking, okay, how can we plant more trees? So then we thought, right, if we start a tree nursery, we can grow our own trees. We can grow up to about 20,000 a year. Okay, great, we'll do that. So where do we plant them? Okay, we need the land. So how do we get the land? So we started up a community benefit society, which meant that we could do a share issue. So we're at a point now where we can do a share issue, we can buy a piece of land, which goes straight into community ownership. Then we can use our trees that we've grown and the volunteers that we've built up to be able to go and put in either a native broadleaf woodland, depending on where the site is, or a kind of agroforestry project, which focuses on the productivity of biodiversity, timber and food. So that's a project that we're hoping to develop a model where that can go national this year, or that's the plan. And then my amazing co-director, Sylvia Mohabir, who is somewhere in the crowd tonight, started a Woods for Wellness program in January. We got some funding from the National Lottery, and it was a kind of COVID response project. The reason I'm mentioning it now, in terms of the synergy between bringing people to the woods and the outdoors, and in terms of well-being, what we're finding is when we combine therapeutic activities in the outdoor, the effects and impact they have are amplified by the natural setting. So we're really trying to make a focus on enabling groups of people to come into the woods for a specifically therapeutic purpose, and then to have that environment kind of filter in and all the benefits of being there work together with those activities. So our other strategy is do something unusual, and we find that there's a kind of sort of like a type of sort of passive income when we've created something that has a bit of novelty value and will do a kind of job for us in attracting people to it without us having to shout about it all the time. So this is a shot of our woodland venue that we have just outside Totnes, and it was a bit of a kind of prototype. So we're working out whether we can kind of have a social franchise model. But we put a lot of time and effort into the building that you can see in the middle. It's a lot bigger than it looks in that photo, and the site's a lot bigger. And we've tried to kind of curate an aesthetic that is sort of neutral enough that it speaks to many different demographics in society, and it's not too niche. And we spent the money on making it an original building so that it just draws interest. So people just pop up at the site and they're like, oh, what's this? And we're like, oh, it's a space. And they're like, what can I do here? You can do things. And that kind of like generates its own sort of buzz. And then, you know, we've kind of echoed that as well. My background's just as a sculptor and a wood carver. So we had a project in Plymouth Central Park. There was an area of park, a long strip, where it was kind of disused. It was kind of like regarded as a bit of a kind of dangerous, sort of unsafe place to be. But there had been a series of trees felled. So we used the timber, we created 5 different sculptures, we put 8 different benches in there, and we saw the footfall go from about 50 people a day to about 250 people a day, 8 months after we'd finished. And again, it's that thing of like, we've just made something and it's taking people to it. We don't have to keep doing that work of saying, come and see it, get outside, connect with nature, that kind of thing. Yeah, so that it's kind of when we first started trying to do this, and we're trying to rebuild this sort of culture outside with the woodland, I just fell into the trap of getting really sort of shouty and preachy and overtly kind of like, come outside, connect with nature, it's good for you. And it was just a real turn off for people, quite frankly, and it wasn't a very good invitation. So we quite quickly learned that if we kind of recontextualize things that people are doing indoors but put them outdoors, then it's instantly relatable. They know what they're going to. So things like pop-up cinema, people get their hair cut all the time, so why not get your hair cut in the woods? So we started doing pop-up barbers, we started doing pop-up theatre, performance, and then the kind of regular groups that people were going to indoors, like the kind of therapy sessions and all that kind of side. So we were taking things out and then out of everyday indoor life and putting them outside, and that's been it's kind of paid dividend for us a lot. And I would recommend I'd recommend experimenting with that, and it will be different for each different community wherever you're based, but just tuning into kind of what it is people are doing and seeing how you can kind of just take it outdoors. And then that kind of shouty thing that I was doing, you just don't need to do, because people build the connection, you habitualize that kind of being outdoors, and then it sort of filters in. So that's been quite useful for us to think about. The biggest thing,
1 minute to go, sorry, Al.
the biggest thing that we've chosen to do is not be the deliverer of our services solely, but to create facilities and enable other people to come in and deliver them. And that is true for Woods for Wellness. Sylvie's done an amazing job of creating 17 different partnerships of different organizations with different specialities who can deliver different things from us. And we just enable that through a sliding scale on our venue, where we charge a premium for private hire, but we subsidize access for communities and charities to come and deliver their services. And then we mix that in with grant funding, so we can offer complementary therapies, and that's what the Wood for Wellness program was. Here's an example of Integrate, who just work with minority groups and marginalized and isolated people. We don't have their networks, we don't have their contacts, we don't have their relationships, but we can enable them to come in and get outside in a familiar and easy way. So that's what's working for us. A little summary: combining well-being, regenerative activity, do something unusual, making it offer easy and relatable, enabling others, and offsetting stuff through the way that you structure your fees. Yeah, thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Al. That was really brilliant, and lots of amazing, helpful nuggets of wisdom and insight that people can take away. Yeah, feel free to give a round of applause through the reactions button if you would like to. Lots of people have been sharing lots of really positive feedback and comments, and really great to get a visual picture of some of your work through your slides. So thanks so much for sharing. Seen a lot of the questions coming in, and I know the team is making sure that they all get covered, and we're going to go to Al for questions after our next presenter, who I'm going to move on to introducing now. So our final presenter of the evening is Adam Murray. So Adam is the head of community empowerment at the RSPB, and also part of the Old Library Wood Collective in Norwich. So the latter is a group of neighbours working with the City Council and police to improve the neighbourhood at a really hyper local level. And after a lot of hard work, they can now proudly say that they've turned a corner of Norwich into a really safe and vibrant part of the city. So we're really looking forward to hearing from Adam about his experiences at RSPB, but also with the Old Library Wood Collective and lessons that can be learned from that. So over to you, Adam.
That's great. Thank you very much. Can I just get a nod if you can see that? Fab. Okay, well, yeah, first of all, big thank you for inviting us along and to see so many lovely people. And I'm here to give you a little bit of a showing two different hats, my sort of time and work with the RSPB, but also with the stuff that I'm doing in my local community itself here in Norwich, and see that other people are representing Norwich as well. So our hearts to you all. So a little bit, first of all, is first of all, starting with, I've worked with the RSPB for about 10 years now, and for the first sort of 8.5 years or so, I was all about looking at marketing our nature reserves and trying to get more and more people out to places like this picture you can see here, seeing some incredibly sort of rare and beautiful species, such as the sort of marsh harriers and bitterns and things like that. But after many years, it's realizing that it's quite often an uphill struggle, because there are huge amounts of barriers for a huge number of people to get people out to these absolutely magical places where you can see so much of this amazing wildlife. So over the last year and a half, I'm part of a brand new team heading up, looking at empowering. So talking, like Al said, about enabling others. We're very much in that sort of new sort of realm of how to empower communities to get connected to the natural world and do it in their way, and then hopefully also take action for that nature as well. So what is nature? It's not necessarily all these rare beasties that a lot of people don't get a chance to see. It's also, like I say here, this is Barbara. And Barbara, or Mrs. Blackbird, as my two kids call her, this is one of the fledglings that we had in our back garden during the summer, during COVID last year. And these were the sort of like stars of our garden. And we got a tiny little Norwich terrace back garden, but luckily we got this beautiful ivy hedge along the side. And we had all these amazing fledgling blackbirds and dunnocks, you know, being produced, and the kids are absolutely getting to know them. And we've got also Disco Ron Dunnock. We've got a disco ball in the garden, obviously, and he likes to sort of just chill out and dance on that, and the kids love him. So all I'd say, big piece of advice generally, is you don't necessarily, I mean, please do come to our nature reserves because they're magic. But what I would say is, like, first of all, get out there and actually, you know, first thing to do is actually just get used, you know, start introducing yourself to some of those amazing beasties that you actually share your neighborhood with. So this kind of leads into what the RSPB have been doing for a good old number of years, is actually shifting to that space where we can actually help people to start getting connected with the natural world in their own way. So if you, for example, if you go to our Wild Challenge webpage, you can go and have a look on there, and there's really cool activities, particularly for families, but actually it works for all of us, of different ways of sort of connecting to the natural world. So yeah, do go and have a look at that if you want some practical tips. But what it comes down to, and this is where the sort of theory bit comes in, is this kind of theory of change, where first of all, we want to get, you know, enable and empower more people to make that connection to the natural world. And then they get to the point where potentially they might start taking their first little step for taking action for nature. And that might be in their garden, if they got a garden. Not everybody's got a garden. So in their balconies or in their local green patches, like the guys in Birmingham been talking about, what can you do in your local patch that's relevant to you? Then all of a sudden you find like-minded people or geeks like myself who are like, oh my God, there's like people like me out there. And you start coming together and you start having that power of the people coming together, where you can start having those conversations with your local authorities and other sort of and other bodies, like for us, which I'll come on to, people like the police. That means that you then start improving those areas, not only for people, but also ideally for nature as well. So they become a lot more sort of biologically diverse. But that process, I mean, for us, which I'll come on to, can take up to sort of like good number of years to do. But this is the theory of what we're trying to achieve. Now we're early days with our community empowerment team. Do give us a shout if you want to come and chat to us. But we've been working over the last sort of like 6 months with the lovely people at the Eden Project to run a series of different workshops to actually try and understand what those different motivations for individuals are to start taking that first step within their community, and also, you know, how you can actually inspire people within your community to start acting for nature as well. But that all assumes that people have taken that first step and actually connected to the natural world. So I'll zoom over this, but this is sort of a link for you to have a look at. We've done some research recently, which, and as Karen and Nasreem have outlined, it's actually really difficult to, for a lot of people, and a lot of barriers to actually get out there and get into green space, because quite often there isn't any, or it's very, very limited. which moves us on really nicely to the example that I wanted to sort of share with you, which is Thorpe Hamlet, which is where I live in Norwich. And it's a lovely part of Norwich, but we do have some issues, and there's issues with everything from fly tipping. We've got issues with drug dealing, drug taking, prostitution, things like that. So a large amount of sort of antisocial behaviour over the sort of like that we've had over the last sort of 5-10 years. So we decided, well, what do you do about it? Can you sit there and as an individual moan, or you can get together, organize your community, come together and start actually taking positive action, as well as trying to work with the different organizations and different bodies like the police and the local authority to sort out the negative behaviors as well. So we started doing things like, well, what are our strengths as a sort of as a community group? We brought ourselves together, set ourselves up, became a constituted group, and started doing stuff that was, you know, we were good at. So I love doing branding and marketing, all that sort of stuff. So we did some really strong stuff there. But then it was simple things. It was that it was a dodgy old park at the top of our road that a lot of this antisocial behaviour was going in. So we thought the best thing we can do is actually get more people into that park, increasing the dwell time with people getting in there. They'll then start, some of the antisocial behaviour will start shifting out. And then what will happen is that people will start realizing they really love that local little green space, and by doing that start then appreciating it, start loving it, and then actually start noticing, you know, the birds and Barbara and the other fledglings from my garden coming up and you know, and enjoying the space as well. So we did everything from like doing art, simple things like putting in benches and the little book swaps which we have in our park as well. Automatically, simple things like that just increased dwell time and got people actually just spending a lot more time and enjoying the local green space. It does not have bitterns and marsh harriers and, you know, fabulous sort of beasties like that, but it has our local neighborhood wildlife, whether that's, you know, the robins and the bugs and beasties, and even the sort of natural wildflowers and things that are coming through as well. All of that has meant that ultimately we are getting more and more people enjoying their local green space, getting out there, appreciating it, getting more connected to the natural world. And whether that's through doing art, and you know, it's amazing that Al's talking about sculptures, because that's exactly what we did. We had some old trees that had been felled, by turning those into sculptures and having that whole sort of like book and library theme, we were getting more people coming in and looking for those. We even had sort of turning this particular squirrel, it turned into a Pokemon stop. So when people are doing Pokemon, we've got a geocache in there. All those little things drive people to the site. And it's got to the point where even our local neighbours have actually started putting in this is like a herb bed that they've been putting in. So it's a real mixed sort of multi-use space, both that's good for wildlife, good for people, good for the local community who are actually using it and using it in lots of different ways. But ultimately, we want more people in those green spaces and using it in the way that they is relevant to them. What that then means is literally put yourself on the map. That's what I recommend. So put yourself on the map through Google, and then people start commenting on all the sort of lovely stuff that they're doing, and we're getting some great responses of like individuals saying that it's a real sort of little haven in our part of Norwich. And not only that, big thing is that working with the likes of these organizations, we're actually getting a massive sort of reduction in that antisocial behavior as well, which was that ultimate goal. So hopefully that's given you a bit of flavour around what I do in my day job as far as trying to reach out and working with communities, but also a bit of an example of some of that theory put into practice in Norwich. So over to you guys.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Adam. That was really wonderful to hear about both your work at RSPB and the work that you've done in Norwich. So yeah, big remote round of applause for Adam as well. And I think that we have got, we're really aware of how many amazing questions have been coming in for and Adam, and Nasreem is still here as well with us. So, and we've also got a way to encourage those of you that are joining us this evening to kind of stay connected with each other. But I think what we're going to do is now go to our second round of Q&A, and then if you towards the end of our time together this evening, we'll share some ways that you can stay connected with each other, find out more about each other's work, and stay involved in this series of events as well. But for now, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Tracy to ask the questions of Al, Adam and Nasreem.
Thank you very much. I'll try share them out evenly. There's lots in the time we've got. So I will start with Al first. Sue asks, how do you get the funding to buy the land? Or do you rent your site, or are you leasing? And then what's the price of a woodland? You know, how much does it cost to buy?
Yeah, I mean, access to land, especially in terms of managing woodland, is the biggest barrier that we're facing. So we've always tried to be as replicable as an organisation as we can. And to be honest, if I'm my own biggest self-critic, that's probably one of the areas that we've not done so well at. It's really hard to raise the capital at the beginning of a project and demonstrate that you can do what it is you're going to say you're going to do to a landowner. So we lease our land off a local estate, and that has been a rocky road, to be honest. So we're looking at buying our own land. The tree planting project that I mentioned about buying land, that is going to be done through share issue and a couple of other revenue streams, which I don't particularly agree with, but I think ecologically we're just at a point where we have to beg, borrow and steal and do whatever we need to do just to get some ecosystem function. So we're tying up with some corporate offsetting initiatives. We're going for private donors and then community buy-in as well, and just a synthesis of those. But that is for agricultural land, and so much is going to change after Brexit because of the land payment scheme that we really don't know what's going to happen. But currently, you know, an acre of woodland is going for anywhere between £10,000 and £15,000.
And there's like a supplementary question to that, which was, what trees were you planting in the photo? And also, do you get any opposition from people who don't want farmland turned into trees? Yeah,
I mean, it's just a massively political thing, and it's so wound up in different people's cultures and heritage and different people's beliefs and different people's remits organizationally, and then the competition between those things and the argument between, you know, what we should be planting where. I mean, our approach is that every single piece of land needs its own assessment, and there isn't a reason for doing anything. You have to just look at what is happening to the water there, what's happening to the soil, what the community like there, what is growing well, what is native, what do you want it to do you want it to be productive, in what way, and that assessment has to be built into any kind of system that you're developing in order to kind of make sure that you're doing the right thing in the right place with the right people. You know, we, on some sites, we would use tree tubes because there's a big deer problem, and, you know, we're planting trees not just for the fruits or for the, you know, for the food, but because we need straight timber, and it's just a fact. So if a deer eats the top of the plant, then it's going to split off, and then we can no longer use it for planks. So some sites would use that. Sometimes we let them rewild. Sometimes we prioritize food. Sometimes we prioritize biodiversity. Sometimes we prioritize timber. And there's just no way of kind of giving an overview of what to do.
It's a complex and varied thing to do, isn't it? It's really. And what trees were in that particular picture that you shared?
That particular picture was a native broadleaf woodland. So things like spindles, silver birch, oak, sweet chestnut, horse chestnut, hawthorn, blackthorn, just a wide spread.
Yeah, fabulous. I get very excited. I get free trees from the Queen's Canopy through my parish council. Yay! So I'm very excited. Adam, someone has asked, I think it was Aislinn asked, how do you engage young people to join in with all your park activities?
This is where it's like, use your strengths. So my wife is a primary school teacher, so that so that helps, first of all. But I do think, you know, that there's, and I'm being slightly flippant, but I, you know, absolutely do use the strengths that you have. So that massively does help. I think there's a lot of ways into primary schools, and particularly, you know, again, a bit like, you know, when in doubt, put people on a minibus and send them off into the wild and hope for the best. You know, schools in particular are struggling so much to get people out to places, and coaches and things like that are so blooming expensive, that actually going to your local patch just down the road is probably just as rewarding and just as sort of mind-blowing for some kids who haven't held a woodlouse in their hand and things like that. It's actually just having those conversations, and again, a bit, I think it was Karen said, building those relationships with local schools and groups. So yeah, I'd say that's always a sort of good starting point.
Yeah, there's like again a supplementary question to that, which when you're looking at sort of the dwell time, getting people in, and as you apply that strategy, if you are trying to encourage transient young people to engage in that green space, as they move around so much, you know, how would you address that issue?
It's a real tricky one, to be honest. And we've got a real mixed bunch of different sort of housing around here. We've got some sort of halfway housing. We've got a lot of sort of like student accommodation where and rental and HMOs and things like this, where a lot of people are transient regardless of whether they're young or their age. And I think that's always difficult, isn't it? Is trying to understand how people can take pride in their local patch if they know they're not always going to be there for a long period of time. Yeah, I don't think we've necessarily got an answer to that, but it's just having your doors open and having really sort of clear communication. There's as many different ways as you can, whether that's putting leaflets through people's doors, putting signs and interpretation up in your local park and things like that, and on social media as well, just so that you can be as welcoming and inclusive to as many people as possible. And some people, it'll be exactly what they need, even if they're only there for a short time, which is, you know, I just need, you know, people and humans and wildlife and nature to, you know, in my local patch and connect with them. So yeah, I haven't really got a sort of, you know, defined answer. It's a tricky one.
Oh, we do like silver bullets. It's a shame.
Yeah.
Thank you. Nasreem, we've got a question about, someone's asked, and I'm quite interested in this, how can those of us who are not in the BAME community be a good ally and meaningfully engage BAME communities in connecting to the outdoors? So that would be really helpful.
That's that in a way. I would say to you, there's two things I always advocate, which is, if you can't do it, you have to find someone who can. So where is there a local organization or group or a local, faith establishment where those communities go? I mean, you don't expect them to come to you, you go to them with the offer. There's no way ever I've been somewhere where I've offered something and somebody says, oh, no, you're handing me free stuff. I don't want that. Nobody does that. They'll say, oh my God, what do I need to do to get that offer? So what we talk, so for example, some of the walks, you start where they are at, and then you take them on the walk, and then you get them to the countryside, or however you do it. Because ultimately in Birmingham, for example, we've got great canal routes. They're totally hidden. Unless you've been there, know the history, someone has led you there, you just don't know they exist. So it's almost like you have to be led at the start, but then what you do is you slowly start to pass on those skills. So you train up some of those volunteers in that organization or one of their staff members, however it works, to then have the skills to carry on doing that in the long run. That's how you're going to get communities again. The more you deliver with them, the more they'll trust you to then do more and more and more. So it really does work like that, because I always say, if you look at our local swimming baths, it's one of only 2 Victorian buildings left in the country from that style. And if you look at it now in 2021, it's still got first class, second class entrance, and then it's got a women's entrance. You know, technically, I suppose we were third class, I don't know. But, you know, you look at that and you think, well, that took what? It was built over 120 years ago. And yet we want communities who've only come here 20, 30 years to make the same strides without giving the stepping stones to make that distance smaller. So it really is about, don't ask them to come to you, go and meet them where they're at. And then from there, you can start to develop and grow. And the more you support people to become more empowered, to have the training, the skills, the qualifications, the experience, the knowledge, the more they'll start to do, because they will gain, you know, they will start to want to do more things. So we took them to Dublin, we took them to the Great North Run. Then it became, well, we've got to go to Dublin. From Dublin, we went to Edinburgh. From Edinburgh, we actually went to Paris and did a marathon. If you told us 5 years ago, we would pay money to get on a plane to run in Paris, I would have laughed you out the water. But actually, it's something we had such a thrill doing. And it became, we'll go for the day, we'll go for the weekend, we'll go for 10 days. And that's how it works. So it's the more confidence that that community gets, the more it will take, genuinely.
Thank you. Thank you. That was fabulous. I've got a question for all speakers. So I don't know who would like to go first. No fighting. So Colette's asked, do any of you recommend charging for activities? We need to raise funds for rent, but try to get everything we do funded. So I suppose that's about income generation and who you get the income from. I know, Nasreem, you said you really try not to charge your participants, but is your funding your commission to do some funding?
Yeah. So the way I do it is we have a commission service, which either the GPs pay for, but at the previously the NHS CCGs paid for. Then it became the local authority. Then it became the Active Wellbeing Society. In 4 years' time, we don't know who it's going to be, but we've made sure we've got a service whereby we're feeding back to the local GPs what we're doing with their patients. So after having the service free for 14 years, maybe they'll put their hand in their pocket in 3 years' time to pay for that. The other thing I always think that really works is putting an event together. So everybody, if you're lucky enough to have some really good volunteers and people who love being in your space, what you do is you do kind of like bring a dish and everybody sells. All you've done is make something, you sell it, and that income comes back to you and everybody feels they've done something really good. The third thing is there a big local organization, a commercial organization, a local, what I'd say, business that wants their name on the door? Or I always joke, if you want the name above our loo door, we're not going to say no, just have a plaque on there. It's about how you can engage more people to be able to do what you want to do, because technically when the money comes in, you're always going to do good with it, you're not going to do bad, and people want their name on that. So or even sponsorship on your t-shirts or whatever. So it can start off small, but it will grow. And the other key thing is have someone who probably in your community, send one of those kind of messages out, you're looking for a fundraiser. There's always someone who'll want to do good and give some time back. And if they can't write out the application for you, they'll support you with the application. They'll look it over, they'll give you some hints, and that really does work.
That's fabulous, thank you. Al or Adam, do you have anything to add to that?
No, only from my perspective is that Nasreem basically just did all the different ways that in Norwich, this is exactly what we did. So we've gone to a local call center, insurance company. They've given us some money. We've done lots of sort of lottery-based funding as well, and it's amazing how that can go a long way when you're doing little things. And then we run events. My 10-year-old made a killing on his lemonade stand. So that's what I'm going to say. So it's that mixture of different income, like from small all the way up to big, that want to kind of get that mix, I guess.
Thank you. Al?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of we try and take people on a case-by-case basis as well, and try and assess what it is they need and whether we can provide it for free, or whether we have to charge them a fee, or whether we charge someone else more money so that we can pay for them to do it. And that, I mean, Nasreem's just like put out all the different kind of funding options as well, which we sort of dabble with. One thing that's happened to us recently is that English teachers seem to make very good funding application people, and anyone that actually has a transferable skill. So I'd second trying to find a fundraiser, but if you can't find someone who identifies themselves as a fundraiser, people, like, a funding bid is a skill to write, and it's essentially just, you know, a mix between writing a story, an essay, and filling out a form. And if you can nail that kind of synergy, the funding world is so deep. Like, it really is. Like, it's great if you can find a fundraiser, because it's like Nasreem was saying about the canals. You know, a fundraiser has been into the fundraising world. They know all the players, all the organizations, and there are certain key websites, like Funding Central is a newsletter that goes out every month or every week, and it's just got a list of all the funds available. So there are these kind of key sort of places to navigate through the resources available. Yeah, just don't be afraid to try something that you haven't tried before, I think, and find people that can help.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that, and sincere gratitude for all your I don't know, I was going to say talks, but it's more about sharing your wisdom, I think. I will hand back over to Flo. Thank you.
Oh, did Adam have anything to add or on that question, just to check in? No, okay, great. Thank you so much, Tracy, and thank you so much again to our speakers, Adam, Al, Nasreem, and Karen, of course. Yeah, it's been really wonderful. So I mentioned just before that round of Q&A that we know that so many of you this evening are, you know, joining us because you're already passionately involved in this work in one way or another. So we've heard from 4 amazing speakers about the work that they do, but we'd also love to give you guys the opportunity to connect with each other. That's part of the intention of running a series of events that we can kind of build up the discussion over time. So what I'm going to do now is in the chat box share a link to a Google document that is a contacts list, basically, and in that list you can hopefully open it up. If you're not able to open it now and this is you know, a bit much for you at this time of the evening or whatever, no worries, we're going to include this information in the follow-up email as well. But for those of you that are super keen, and I see people have been including website links and, you know, project names in the chat box already. So for those of you that are super keen to connect with each other and share what you're doing with others on the call, do open that document up. And what we've done is we've just added the first name of everyone that's registered for this event this evening. So, and the first names are in alphabetical order. So you can scan down, and of course this is totally optional. So if you would prefer not to share anything, your name will just be kind of deleted from the list at a later point. And it's only first names that are included there at the moment. But if you would like to, you can scan down, find your name on the list, and then just add your second name, your email address, your website link, your social media, anything that you would like to share, essentially. And there's also a section there for notes and comments you'd like to share. So if you want to kind of share a little bit more about your particular interests or what you're up to in relation to this topic, then that would be great. I'm actually just gonna, in real time, try and freeze the top row so that as you're scanning down, you can see, yeah, that should help. So as you're scanning down, you can see what the headings are in the spreadsheet. So feel free to, add the details to that as we draw this event to a close. And again, if you're not happy to add your details, no pressure at all. And if you would like to, but you want to do it later, that's also great. We can include the link in the follow-up email, so you'll have a chance to do that in your own relaxed time. But yeah, lovely if you want to share, you know, your project or what you're up to, because it's great to connect with so many like-minded people who are all passionate about nature, community, and well-being. V's asking, how do you save the doc? You can simply save the link somewhere on your own system, and then from that link you'll always be able to access that document. It's freely available from that link. We'd just love to draw this beautiful evening that we've had together to a close now. So I just want to share a few announcements about further events in this series that you can join and further ways that you can stay connected with the Network of Wellbeing and Eden Project communities. So this is the second in this series of events. We would love to hear any feedback you have on this event. So my colleague Jana has just put in the chat box a series of links, and at the top there's a survey which is very brief but just gives us a chance to kind of get a sense of how you found the event and how we can improve in future. And then we've also got links to our future events in the series. So the next event will be in 2 weeks' time, and it's called Playful, Mindful, Alive, How Nature Improves Your Wellbeing. So we'll really be looking at, we've gone from kind of wider access to nature in the first session, which will include the recording link to in the follow-up email if you missed it. This session we've been looking specifically at kind of community engagement, and then next time we'll be looking at some of those personal well-being approaches that can be taken in terms of nature connection. And then following all the speaker events of the series, we'll be running a more interactive workshop to really support you, those that are most passionate amongst you, to really embed the lessons that have been shared through the series into your work, into your lives. We'll be running a kind of smaller workshop that's going to be open to only those that have been to one of the events in the series, and the link to that, sign up to that, is also shared in those links that Jana has put in the chat. And again, all of this will be shared again in the follow-up email. And yeah, I think those are the main things that we have coming up. There's a few other events that Now and or Eden are running that we'll include in the follow-up email separate to this series. But the last thing that I'd love to do is we always like to take a screenshot of these events so that we can just share on social media and keep in touch with each other. So if you would prefer not to be in a screenshot, just make sure that your camera's off. And if you would love to be in the screenshot, do your camera smile, wave, whatever you would like now, so that I can get you included. That is wonderful. Thank you so much. Great. So thank you so much for all of your enthusiastic participation this evening. Do stay in touch on social media in between events. The hashtag is Nature and Wellbeing Now. You can connect with Now and Eden Project communities on social media. And we look forward to welcoming you to future events in the series. I'm just going to briefly check in with Tracy if there's anything else you'd like to add, and otherwise we will.
No, not at all. I just think it's been a wonderful evening. Someone said it's the best they've had in a long time.
Thank you, and thank you everyone that's joined us this evening and made it such a wonderful event.